Hello, guys. In these really challenging times when the whole world is paralyzed, waiting for the US elections, observing how North Korea, Iran, China, and Russia unite against the democratic world, I felt an urgent need to speak with a friend and a great friend of Ukraine, a YouTuber whom I respect greatly and who does not need any introduction, Jake Bro. Hi, Jake.
Hello, Anna. Thanks for having me back on your channel.
I'm really happy to talk to you about some very complex things. And I have joined YouTube at the very start of the Russian war against Ukraine because I felt the need to explain more about Ukraine to the world. But YouTube is a magical place where you actually learn a lot from others. And I'm very grateful for that global perspective that you give in your very professional videos. And one of your recent videos about North Korean soldiers coming to fight against Ukraine changed my Ukrainian attitude towards the situation. To begin with, I have to tell you that when we've learned about 12,000 North Korean soldiers getting ready to kill Ukrainians, destroy infrastructure, and so on, we were not that much afraid because we realized in what state these North Korean soldiers are. But we were a little bit offended with the lack of reaction, with people expressing concerns but not reacting to another country joining the war against Ukraine, a nuclear country. But then, having watched your video, I felt it is more of a provocation. So my question number one will be, these North Korean soldiers backing up Russia in Kursk or on the front lines in Ukraine, do you think this is a real threat, a start of the Third World War, or more of a typical Russian provocation?
Well, the autocracies of the world that are outcasts, these are the most sanctioned countries in the world, countries like Iran and North Korea. They don't have any real allies. To say World War III is starting, none of these countries want to start World War III because they'd be destroyed instantly. Russia loves to say after 2.5 years they're winning their battle over NATO, and NATO's not fighting this war. No NATO soldiers have been killed, no NATO jets have been shot down, no NATO ships have been sunk. So they're delusional, but they know the truth. And these 12,000 North Korean soldiers coming to Ukraine, this is just about optics. It's a publicity stunt. I'm sure Putin paid Kim Jong-un very well for these men. These men are slaves. They don't receive payments. Their families back in North Korea don't receive payments. Kim Jong-un released these people from the Hermit Kingdom, and they're now loose in Russia. I don't think it's going to go well. These people are the most brainwashed, helpless people in the world, really. They have no clue about the internet or the modern world or, what is a beef sandwich taste like. But how is this going to play out over time? We're going to experience this together. But I don't think Putin cares what the world thinks of the performance of these North Korean troops 3, 4, 5, 6 months from now. It's all about influencing these elections. Moldova just had an election. Georgia's having an election in a couple days. The United States is having an election. I mentioned these 3 in my last video, and my subscribers told me Romania is also having an election in a week or two. So it's about shaping the debate, changing the narrative, boosting Russian morale, which I do think this accomplished. Based on the videos I've seen, Russian forces are excited they're getting help. But how much help is it? The Ukrainian Ministry of Defense just reported last week, in 7 days, Russia lost 10,000 soldiers. Killed, captured, and wounded, they lost 10,000 over 7 days. North Korea is sending about 10,000. That buys Putin another 7 days of this war. It's nothing in the grand scheme of things. So I don't think this is going to impact the battlefield too much, but it is shaping the narrative, which is why in that video I was trying to explain to people, this isn't some kind of knockout punch from autocracies of the world. The democratic West has to stand firm, continue supporting Ukraine. Russia can't do this forever, and they are showing signs of exhaustion.
True. Actually, one of the first reactions inside Ukraine was that this invitation of North Korean soldiers to Russia is a sign that they don't have enough people to protect their borders. We have demonstrated the vulnerability of Kursk region. More regions can illustrate something similar sometime soon. And actually, do you think that these soldiers will return to North Korea ever? Will they provide some military expertise? Because I've seen some experts being very concerned about Kim Jong-un sending these people to train, to get combat experience, and then to use it somewhere else on the planet. It's easy to guess where, right? So do you think it is a possible training for North Korean soldiers, or more of slavery and sacrifice?
I played a clip from Kremlin State TV in my last video in which the commentator just spoke the truth. Why do the Russians want to use 10,000 North Korean troops instead of mobilizing 10,000 of their own citizens? And they make the economic arguments. The Russian economy is overheating because of a lack of labor. There's so much money and stimulus being spent by the national government, they can't find workers to do all the work necessary. This is driving up wages, which is driving up inflation. So they said on Kremlin State TV, we can't mobilize more people. If we pull Russian men out of the economy, it just makes the economy worse, makes inflation worse. So let's stay economically productive at home with our domestic economy and use that money to buy slaves. Let's import 10,000 North Korean men who are not being too economically productive in their home country and send them to fight and die in the war zone. So concerning the Hermit Kingdom, I lived in South Korea for 6 years. I've seen lots of documentaries. I've read lots of books about North Korea. And I don't think many people paying close attention to the war in Ukraine know too much about how bad things are in North Korea. Plainly spoken, it's an open-air prison camp in which 26 million people are prisoner. They're all prisoner to the Kim family. Nothing gets in, nothing gets out. So the fact that Kim Jong-un was willing to roll the dice and let these 10,000 North Korean men out of the country, this is something his father, Kim Jong-il, never would have done. Something his grandfather, Kim Il-sung, son, never would have done. Because these people can never come home now. And I think Kim Jong-un knows that, but he's of a different generation, a different age. The guy is younger than me, and he wants to see what is his country made of? What is his military made of? So there are, I'm sure, inner circle members that are in the war zone to observe. They will come back to Pyongyang and report personally. But the fact that these 10,000 ordinary men were allowed to leave the country, it's a death sentence. They're seeing things, they're learning things that you're not allowed to see. You're not allowed to learn in order to maintain the cultural purity of the North Korean people. North Korean society is the closest we've ever come to George Orwell's 1984, in that the Ministry of Truth eradicates language, eradicates words, eradicates ideas that might foment rebellion. Everything about North Korean society is structured in a way to control people's minds, their language, their actions, so nobody will ever rebel against the Kim family. We all criticize, the Great Firewall of China and their censorship, or how dictatorial and authoritarian Putin is. It's peanuts. It's nothing compared to what the Kim family for 75 years has accomplished in North Korea. It's the most tragic human catastrophe in the world. And these North Korean men are never going to see their families again. They're never going to be allowed to return. They were purchased as slaves by Putin to be used however the Russians see fit. They have no rights. They have no recourse. If these men want to live, they've got to find a way to survive, to surrender to the Ukrainian forces.
And Ukrainian forces are working on that. I've read that now our soldiers who are potentially in the Kursk region or elsewhere are working on the translation of similar Korean phrases like give up, we will feed you, or something like that. This can actually be the only option for them to survive. And I had a thought that maybe some of the soldiers actually join this visiting army trying to escape. We know some of them already tried that. Will they survive? Well, the winter will show. And I was actually surprised to learn from your previous videos that you've spent 6 years in South Korea. So you definitely know a lot about the South Korean mindset. And taking into account the absence or maybe postponed reaction of many global leaders to this Kim Jong-un's decision, South Korea started speaking about the possibility to supply Ukraine with serious weapons, potentially to provide some specialists on the ground. Anyway, support and back up Ukraine since North Korea is backing up Russia. And actually, it's a tragedy of the people because this is one nation separated with the crazy Kim Jong-un and his dynasty regime. Do you think that the role of South Korea in this war can grow larger, like more important, or it's more of another option to express concerns?
Well, I want to first explain to people that there is no ancient rivalry. There is no blood rivalry between the North Koreans and the South Koreans. It's not like other hot spots in the world where basically people have been fighting, like different ethnic groups have been fighting for thousands of years. The North Koreans and the South Koreans are one people. They're one history, one culture, one language. It's the Kim family who has hijacked half the peninsula and has been murdering and terrorizing people for 75 years. So it's not easy to get the South Koreans excited to go to war against the North. They don't have any hatred towards the North Korean people. It's just the Kim regime. But South Korea the last 2.5 years has wanted not to get directly involved so as not to give the North Koreans an excuse to become willing participants. So South Korea was being mindful and careful, which is a consideration. They were saying, we're not going to provide lethal aid because we don't want the North helping the Russians kill Ukrainians. That would be a bad thing. And after 2 years, Putin is so desperate, he basically kept off increasing the bid, and finally it was enough money for Kim Jong-un to say, okay, we'll do this. I get a spy satellite. I get a nuclear submarine. I get cargo planes full of gold bricks. All right, I'll give you the artillery shells. I'll give you the missiles. I'll give you the 10,000 guys. Just keep feeding me. So the South Koreans can do a lot. They're an industrial powerhouse. They're a wealthy country. They're one of the top 10 weapons exporters in the world. They do have to go through a political process. I think their equivalent of Congress or Parliament has to vote because currently national law prohibits exporting weapons to an active combat zone, like a nation at war. So that has to change. South Korea has a very weak presidency because they're so suspicious of authority figures. South Korea only really became a democracy in 1994. Prior to that, it was a pro-American, pro-capitalist dictatorship, basically. So yes, Koreans today are very suspicious of executive authority because they've had their own past and history to overcome. So they have to have a debate, they have to have a vote, they have to build consensus, but there's a lot of equipment and I think expertise they could help Ukraine with.
Well, good to know, because I totally agree with you when you say that there is no real cooperation, there is no real partnership between authoritarian regimes. And we clearly understand it's not the friendship or shared values that unite North Korea and Russia. And by the way, one of the very important arguments that you have put up in your video on North Korea was the attitude to religion. Because Ruski Mir pretends to be a very Christian philosophy when in reality they bless weapons that later kill children in Ukrainian hospitals. But at the same time, North Korea practices something similar to the USSR, godless philosophy, forbidden to read Bibles. And here we see how clearly and quickly they are ready to back each other up when it's about killing people and
So
changing
in
world order.
so in North Korea, Kim Il Sung, the founder of North Korea, uh, it's the strongest cult of personality that has ever existed in the world. And he basically wanted to eradicate any ideology or thinking that would promote anyone above him. So North Korea doesn't even identify as communist because they don't want to explain to their people who Karl Marx is, a German, or who Lenin is, a Russian. Nobody is allowed to have more significance or more importance than the eternal god of their nation, Kim Il Sung. Kim Jong-un is his grandson. He's the current living god. So you're only allowed to think about, you're only allowed to worship, you're only allowed to write songs or write books, or it's so stupid in North Korea. All of their math questions revolve around Kim Jong-il, Kim Il-sung, or Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong-un loves muffins. If Kim Jong-un has 5 muffins and adds to his basket 7 muffins, how many muffins does Kim Jong-un have? That's how brainwashed these people are. Their entire lives, their entire schooling, all of their songs, all of their TV shows. You can go on Google Maps and look at the capital city of Pyongyang, and it's stupid. You will get off, Kim Il-sung Highway and take the Kim Il-sung ramp to Kim Il-sung Square to go over the Kim Il-sung Bridge to pass by Kim Il-sung University on your way to Kim Il-sung Stadium. I'm not exaggerating. It's this stupid. And I want nothing more in this world than to see the Kim family collapse and for the North Korean people to be liberated, but that's a tough task to accomplish.
Yeah, but I feel sorry for these people, and it seems so obvious. Like we can either liberate people from North Korea, show them internet, give them muffins, introduce them to music, or we can slowly watch how Russia turns into North Korea. And, from one point of view, of course, there is no real cooperation between such countries and regimes, but we clearly see how they back up each other. And I think it's no secret that China provides the necessary weapons, Iran provides the missiles, North Korea missiles and people. So it is quite obvious that they are uniting. And as General Zaluzhny said, please don't think that they unite just against Ukraine. We are a big country, we are an important country, but let's not overestimate even the importance of Ukraine. Obviously, they have bigger plans to change the world order, to undermine the democratic countries, and well, it was quite predictable. But honestly, watching the Secretary General of UN shaking hands with Putin after the International Criminal Court issued an order to arrest him, visiting Russia together with the leaders of China, India, I felt a little bit disturbed. Do you think that this axis of evil is getting stronger after 2 and almost 3 years of war?
Yes, it's about corruption. And, during the Cold War, it was simple. You're the democratic capitalist West, or you're the authoritarian communist East or Second World or whatever you want to call them. And when the Soviet Union collapsed, we all patted ourselves on the back and said, this is the end of history. There will never be any great wars ever again. And we opened up our governments, our financial institutions, our international organizations to these dictatorships. And there was kind of this unspoken truce between free societies, democracies, and authoritarian regimes. We told them, the United States, the Western Alliance, whatever, We told them we're not going to threaten you. Whatever you want to do at home, you can do at home. We're going to trade with you. You know, you can get bank accounts with us. We'll send in Western companies to partner with you to help you extract your natural resources. This will make you rich. This will make us a lot of money. The entire world has a greater supply of oil and gas and coal and whatever. And these authoritarian regimes just took our money, made themselves rich, built up their militaries, and now they're threatening to attack us. So the last 30 years, I think there's some reflection needed. But a lot of people got rich. A lot of people in the West, in our safe, free societies, partnering with these authoritarian regimes, which they had permission to do, which they were encouraged to do. The theory was nations that trade together don't go to war with each other. Mm-hmm. We were wrong, but these links are still there. These Western companies that have invested all this time, energy, and capital in these authoritarian regimes, China and Russia especially, they're being told, you got to liquefy, you got to get out. And I don't think in the long run, China and Russia can compete with the West when they don't respect patents, they don't respect copyright, they don't respect labor rights, they don't respect environmental laws. These authoritarian regimes are incredibly brittle, and they do break down from corruption. The West was propping them up with our good business practices. Basically, we have to have fair accounting and transparency to some degree with Western corporations to function and thrive. So it's a grab bag. It's an everybody for everything situation in these authoritarian regimes when basically their Western partners pull out. You know, if Shell and BP and ExxonMobil won't partner with Venezuela or Russia, shocking. Their production goes down. Their quality goes down. They can't perform as well. They can't make as much money. And big picture, I don't think we can do business with authoritarian regimes in the future. I think we have to tell our companies, you can't work with them until they reform their governments. Because we've learned it's just the pattern that's been repeating for thousands of years. Once an individual, a man, becomes the sovereign of his geographic region, he's killed all of his opposition, he's imprisoned all the journalists, nobody questions him, he's got complete unchecked power, such as Putin and Xi. They all do the same thing. They all start looking at their neighbor's stuff, and they think, well, why don't I just go attack my neighbor, kill him, and take his stuff? That will make me richer. And that's what we tried to do in the post-World War II era. We entered the Bretton Woods agreements, where we said we're done with empires, we're not redrawing the maps. You're not allowed just to attack your neighbor, steal his territory, steal his stuff, and still be part of the international community.
You're right. And I think that after the collapse of the USSR, it was a great mistake to believe that Russia should be a guarantee of peace and security in this world, like in this part of the world. Many actually started this strong cooperation with Russia, demilitarization of Ukraine and other former republics, and the plan was good. But the partner to perform the job was bad. I think if Ukraine was given this kind of chance, like, I don't know, to back up Georgia, Moldova, it would be a safer place. And once in your video, you have described your own country, and that, like, living you can see clearly two periods. Like, for the first 20 years of your life, it was one kind of approach, and now it's changing a little bit. And somehow I have recollected this phrase when I read the reactions to Zelensky's victory plan. And some people, Vlad Wexler, by the way, was also speaking about that the plan looks as if Zelensky addresses those democracies that existed like 20, 30, 40 years ago. And right now, many of the democratic countries are going through very challenging almost like life-threatening, well, democracy-threatening processes, and will act differently. So, as if Zelensky addresses, let's say, EU or US of 1980s, 1990s, not right now. What do you think about this point of view, and what do you think about Zelensky's victory plan in general?
I feel like we should first identify what has changed in our democracies in the last 15, 20 years. And I think it's social media. Going back 20 years ago, back to 2004, I don't think, as an example here in the United States, the war in Iraq would have happened if all the social media that exists today existed in 2003. George Bush, President Bush, was able to basically force America to go to war by just controlling the corporate media. Fox News led the way, and CNN and NBC followed their lead. And that's all really we had. We had newspapers, we had cable news, and that was it. Facebook didn't exist. Twitter didn't exist. There was no alternative media. So the American people, I think, don't believe in established corporate legacy media, which there's justification to argue against, given our recent history. But the alternative that people have turned to is just a cesspool of hate and misinformation. People trying to get their world news from Karen on Facebook or, Butt Dude 69 on Twitter. Like, it's just completely absurd what people are seeing and choosing to believe. And I think especially for older people, older generations, where all the information they've been receiving their whole life was controlled and it was filtered, and they generally did think it was safe. And now they're being inundated with AI comments and bot comments to shape the narrative, and it's working. We have a crisis in our democracies because we do have free speech and free press, and nobody understands fully how impacted we are from these authoritarian regimes like China controlling TikTok, or Elon Musk now controlling Twitter, he's obviously working to help Russia and get Donald Trump reelected. So I think the time for an autopsy is not right now, because we have an election in less than 2 weeks. If we can survive this, we desperately need to have some introspection and figure out what's happening to us and how do we correct this? How do we start building a positive narrative for free societies, democracy? I like living in a free society. I like having a say in how my government is run. But unfortunately, I think there are a lot of people who want to embrace strongman politics. They're not going to say they're pro-fascist or pro-authoritarian or whatever, but they are going to say, I want somebody that can basically silence the chaos. I want somebody who's forceful and strong and can just fix the situation, because there's so much negative news. There's so much bad stories. There's so much that makes me sad. I need a savior. And I don't think Donald Trump's the man, but there are tens of millions of Americans who believe that for some reason.
Actually, this dream of a strong hand, I don't know if if it translates correctly into English, but that's what Russians keep repeating, that they need a strong hand to control their society. And you only want that until you experience that. Trust me, generations of Ukrainians who did not survive the Soviet Union and have like a more or less healthy mindset don't want that repetition. And it's a blessing to change presidents, to criticize them, to mock them, and to have this right.
Monarchy and authoritarians, dictators, that's all we've ever had for like 10,000 years. I mean, there's some very short-lived, brief cultures and societies that allowed ordinary people to have a say in their society. That's a crazy new idea. And it's so easy to lose it. I mean, I forget which founding father said that, but we're always one election away from losing our elections. We're always one election away from losing our say in our government. And there are always going to be these people making this argument of, we live in dangerous times, we live in uncertainty, elect me and I can fix everything. give me supreme power and I can fix everything. That's what Putin offered to the Russians after the chaos of the 90s, and they took it. And they're now living with the consequences.
And actually, peace is also something very rare if we look at the history of the planet. Most of time, people were at war, and that's why it's so important to try and
But did the
preserve
people of those countries want those wars, or did the authoritarians, the monarchs, the dictators want those wars? It's so easy to go to war when it's not your kids dying.
Yeah, exactly.
You know.
Exactly. And now, like, all of the world is watching what will happen after the elections in the United States. Honestly, sometimes I feel a little bit irritated, especially if, for example, the leaders of Poland want to postpone their decisions or actions based on the results of the US elections, because whether Putin is a criminal, whether this war is bad, illegal, it's obvious without knowing the name of the next US president. It's just like either it is a crime or not. But Ukraine seems to play a certain role in the US election narratives and so on. Do you see that the attitudes of people change towards Russia and Ukraine as presidential campaign continues?
Less than 2 weeks to go before the election, and as far as the comments from Prime Minister Tusk of Poland, I agree with him. He's correct. I think a lot of people in NATO, a lot of people in the European Union, they can't make any decisions until they know for sure. And unfortunately, they have to respect the opinion, the will of the American people. It's impossible to rig an election here in the United States. Because of our system of federalism, every state is responsible for their own elections within that state. Every county is in charge of the elections in their county. So there is no federal system that the president or the attorney general can rig. It's not possible. So we had a free and fair election that elected Joe Biden in 2020. We're going to have a free and fair election that's going to elect somebody in 2024. And unfortunately, yes, it is the correct attitude of European leaders to respect the will of the American people if they choose to reelect Donald Trump as president. They then have to figure out how they're going to work with the guy and get some kind of cooperation from him the next 4 years, because that's in the best interest of their people. 2 weeks is not a long time to wait, honestly.
No, I did not mean Polish attitude towards the US elections, but I meant Polish decision on the support of Ukraine while waiting for the US elections. Like many countries put on pause their public evaluation of many things, like North Korean troops moving, like long-range missiles and everything, simply waiting what will happen in the US, forgetting about their own like subjective actions. So that because
Donald Trump has made it clear he does not support Ukraine, and he doesn't want anyone else supporting Ukraine. So if Donald Trump is elected, other NATO partners will stop supporting Ukraine to not upset or offend Donald Trump. And they want to know what's Donald Trump's plan before they do anything on their own that could potentially upset Donald Trump, because they're going to have to live with him. They're going to have to work with him the next 4 years. This is not a pleasant conversation, but this is the hard reality. I'm sorry.
This is definitely what upsets us, I have to be honest.
No, it's completely unfair for you. It's completely unfair for you. But yeah, it's brutal.
You know, when I think about this desperate North Korean soldiers that are sent to die somewhere in the other part of the world, not knowing anything about this world, not tasting good French fries or watching Netflix movie, I feel very sorry for them. And at the same time, I think that 50 years ago, lots of strong democratic nations would try to save such North Korean people, would try to destroy the regime of Kim Jong-un. And now it feels like some of them are ready to sacrifice even well-developed democracies like Ukraine, struggling, protecting the values. So yeah, sometimes it feels pretty awkward. What
We
do
we
we?
we we had well. Let me explain that. We had a purpose, and it was backed by financial incentives during the Cold War. So it was easy to unite Republicans and Democrats on foreign policy. What should we do about the USSR? The USSR was godless and atheist, so we had the Christian and evangelical community unified against them. Communism wanted to outlaw all private property, so this united capitalists and the business class. Politically, the USSR wanted to become a global hegemon, so that unified the national security policy. Uh, it was easy to get everybody on board to oppose the Soviet Union during the Cold War. But when they collapsed, I mean, Putin is very smart. He said, well, we're no longer an atheist nation. We're actually the most Christian nation in the world. We're defending Christian rights. Well, this weakens the foreign policy alliance here in the United States to oppose Russia. Putin says, we're not going to outlaw private property. We'll have billionaires. We'll have per capita more billionaires than you. And this enticed a lot of people in the business community, the banking community, the legal community here in the United States to say, why are we fighting the Russians? They want to do business with us. They want to send us money. And then it comes down to politics. And this is insane, but there are people in the United States who say the United States has been irresponsible as the sole global hegemon. It's better to have a multipolar world. It's better if there are two superpowers in the world to balance out the bad instincts of the lone United States. So yeah, it's just fractured. It's just impossible to get people to build consensus when it's so obvious to people like you and me. You just look at the pictures and videos, you hear the stories. Russia is bombing children's hospitals, and that's not enough to get people unified. And I'm just using the United States as an example, but all the other NATO partners look to our lead. Canada, the UK, France, Germany, they look at the United States and saying, if they don't even have their shit together, why should we even try? It's a really sad situation, but we're going to need some time to figure this out.
Yeah, hopefully we have this time. I was thinking a lot why sometimes so different political parties with totally contrary ideologies like super left and super right can both support Russia. That's what we often see in various EU countries, like ultra right and ultra left, both for Russia. And it's all because Russia is so fake and they pretend to have everything. Like, if you're looking for communism, you will find one. If you're looking for a God, we are super Christian Orthodox. Have a look. We have icons with Stalin and Tsar Nicholas, whom he murdered. And they worship like Bolsheviks and Tsar, whom they killed. And like, it's a mixture of everything. And of course, it's not real because it cannot be real. You cannot be a communist and a Christian. But at the same time, lots of communist deputies build churches before the elections to bribe the villages in Russia. And somehow people don't dig deeper, and they have this like image everyone can find whatever he wants in Mother Russia, when in reality it is just an image.
Something I've been thinking about recently is that the idea of a provable fact is actually like a recent concept. Like, knowing something is true 100% is not something that human minds have been accustomed to. This is like a recent thing where you can go on Google and you can find proof of something. If you were alive 500 years ago, there was no Google. There was no way to prove something, with the internet or get facts. You accepted as your reality whatever you heard someone say with the strongest conviction. That preacher, that guy yelling on the corner on a soapbox, like, that was your truth. Whoever said something the most consistently and the most forcefully, you just accepted as a fact or truth because you had no way to prove otherwise. So that's how the human brain has been accepting information for tens of thousands of years. You just follow whoever seems the most sure of themselves. So Russia is taking advantage of this. Russia just puts out complete nonsense that, in my opinion, is obviously, you can prove it wrong with facts on the internet with a quick Google search. But that just isn't how people's brains work. People who are confused, people who are scared, people who are exhausted from modern living, they hear these people who are so strong and so forceful and so sure of themselves about complete nonsense. They just accept it because it's the path of least resistance. I think there's a lot of people living in Russian society who don't ask questions or don't think about things because it's the path of least resistance, and they're exhausted. They're tired from modern living. And there's a lot of people in America that way too. So once again, I think we need to reevaluate the structure of our society and figure out what is weakening us.
And that will make a good question for the end of this conversation. Hopefully, more to come with this context. Understanding what is wrong, understanding that human brain is imperfect and many people choose to avoid facts or simply to wait for a strong leader to come and solve all the problems on the planet, which is obviously impossible. How do we win? And by we, or at least how do we work to win? And by we, I don't mean just Ukraine, I mean all of us people who still want to know the truth and use Google.
If you want to use Bing, you can use Bing. You don't have to use Google.
Okay, okay, I will.
To anybody still watching, as far as the early mail-in votes, early voting, Donald Trump's path to victory is low voter turnout here in the United States. If there's high voter turnouts, then Kamala Harris is going to win. All early indications is that voter turnout is extremely high so far as mail-in ballots, early voting. And I'm confident that on November 5th, we're not going to know. Donald Trump is not going to concede. He didn't concede 4 years ago. There's going to be court challenges. But if I can be brutally honest, if Donald Trump was too stupid to stay in power when he controlled the federal government, when he was in charge of the Justice Department and the FBI and the National Guard, he's not coming back from this. As an outsider, he has even less of a chance of stealing this election. So I'm excited to get the next 2 weeks over with, and then we can start talking about another year's worth of funding and military aid for Ukraine, and we can start planning the next year of this war. In my opinion, economically, Russia doesn't have another year of the tempo of fighting they've been fighting the last 2 months.
Yes, they are doing it to impress or to start negotiations, having more of Ukrainian land. So after a frozen conflict, they can regroup and continue. That's quite obvious. Because actually for survival, Putin needs war. What many politicians, that's a typical mistake. Many think that Putin wants peace or Putin wants to return back to G8. No, he doesn't. He wants to remain at power in Russia and to control people, to stop protests, to live in bunkers on quarantine. He needs war. War explains everything. War explains his total control. So he's not looking for the way to end it. He's looking for the way to continue it, and maybe not just in Ukraine. Jake, thank you so much for everything, for doing some psychotherapy to Ukrainian viewers, because we do learn a lot, and there are some messages that make us feel safer, or at least confident that there are people who see and understand the reality the way it is. Thank you for explaining complex things, and thank you for standing with Ukraine and all the democratic, freedom-loving world.
Keep fighting the good fight. Russia will be defeated.
Glory to Ukraine.
Glory to the heroes.